Hi, welcome back guys to MR.Creepy N. In today's episode, I'm going to narrate true, scary mountain entity stories. I'm still new to this, and I've searched for truly real stories to share with you. If I make a mistake, please let me know. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and share this with your friends. Also, let me know from where you're watching and what time it is now. Thanks. Now, let's start. My girlfriend Nora used to tease me about it constantly. Said I was the only person she knew who color-coded a grocery run. So when she suggested we do a last-minute camping trip up into the Pisgah National Forest that October, no reservations, no planned route, just drive and find a spot, I almost said no. But she had this way of framing things that made caution sound like cowardice. And honestly, things between us had been good that fall. Really good. I didn't want to be the one who pumped the brakes on something she was excited about. We left on a Friday evening after she got off work. Her car, her playlist, her energy carrying the whole drive up into the mountains outside of Brevard, North Carolina. By the time we found a pull-off on a forest road that looked flat enough to pitch a tent, it was already past 8 and the dark was coming fast through the trees. I noted that we were well off any marked trail. No signage, no fire rings, no indication anyone used this spot regularly. Nora said that was the point. We set up camp quickly, got a small fire going, and the first couple hours were exactly what she'd promised. Cold, clean air, the kind of dark you only get when there's no town light for 20 miles in any direction, and the quiet that felt earned rather than empty. We ate, talked, laughed about nothing important. Around 10 we climbed into the tent, and I actually felt myself relax in a way I hadn't in months. I woke up at 1 a.m. No specific reason, no sound that I could identify. Just that immediate wide-awake feeling that means something has already changed. Nora was asleep beside me. The fire outside had burned down. I lay still and listened, and after about 30 seconds I heard it. Movement in the trees directly across the clearing from our tent. Not an animal, not the random pop of cooling wood. Footsteps, one person walking, slow and unbothered, through the brush maybe 40 feet out. I sat up. Nora stirred. I put my hand on her shoulder, and she went still. The footsteps stopped. Then a light came on, a flashlight or a headlamp, pointing directly at our tent. It held there, steady, unmoving, for a long moment. I could see the glow of it through the tent fabric. A concentrated beam aimed right at us from across the clearing. Nora was fully awake now. She found my hand in the dark and gripped it. I unzipped the tent slowly and looked out. He was standing at the tree line. A man, I could make out that much, wearing dark clothing, heavy set, standing with a stillness that felt chosen rather than natural. He had a flashlight in one hand, pointed at the ground now, and in his other hand, held low at his side, was a knife, a large one. The blade caught just enough moonlight that I could see it clearly. He wasn't doing anything with it, just holding it, standing there at the edge of the trees with it hanging at his side like it was the most normal thing in the world to be standing in the dark, outside a stranger's tent at 1 a.m. with a blade in your hand. I said, "Hey, you all right out there?" "Nothing." I said it again, louder this time. He took one step forward out of the tree line, just one. Then he stopped again. His head was down slightly, like he was looking at the ground between us, like he was measuring something. Then he raised the knife, not in a threatening gesture exactly, more like he was showing it to us, and started walking toward the tent. Not running, walking, calm and deliberate, the flashlight swinging at his side. I grabbed Nora's wrist and said one word, "Car." She didn't argue. We came out of the tent at a low run, left everything, sleeping bags, food, her jacket, and covered the 20 feet to her car in seconds. She had the keys. We got in, doors locked, and I watched through the windshield as he crossed the clearing and stopped at our tent. He stood there looking at it. Then he crouched down and picked up something from the ground near the tent door. I couldn't see what. He straightened up, looked directly at the car, directly at us through the windshield, and stood completely still. Nora started the engine. He didn't move as we pulled out, just stood in the headlights, watching us reverse down the forest road with that knife still in his hand and whatever he picked up held against his chest. I watched him in the side mirror until the trees swallowed the clearing and he was gone. We drove 40 minutes without speaking before Nora pulled into a lit gas station parking lot and put the car in park. Her hands were shaking on the wheel. She said, "What did he pick up?" I didn't know. I still don't. That's the part that has stayed with me. Not the knife, not the walk toward us, but the fact that he bent down and took something from outside our tent door. Something we hadn't noticed was there. Something that apparently already belonged to him, or that he put there before we arrived. We reported it the next morning at a ranger station outside Brevard. The ranger on duty listened, took notes, asked for a description. When I described the location, the forest road, the pull-off, the proximity to a certain ridgeline, he stopped writing and looked up. He said that areas had some activity over the years. Hiker complaints, mostly. We've never been able to identify anyone. I asked if it was safe. He capped his pen. I'd recommend sticking to designated sites. That was 8 months ago. Nora and I don't camp anymore. We've talked about it a few times. She says she wants to try again, somewhere with other people around, somewhere with a gate and a ranger on duty. I tell her, sure, maybe next summer. But every time it comes up, I think about that walk across the clearing, that knife catching the moonlight, the way he crouched down and picked something up like he'd been waiting all night for us to leave it behind. And I keep saying, maybe next summer. I don't think I'll ever actually go. I spent most of my summers hiking with my dad through the hill country of eastern Kentucky, and even after he passed, I kept going back. It was the one place that still felt like his. So, when my buddy Derek mentioned his family owned a piece of land outside of Harlan, up near Ridge, called Copperhead Bluff, I didn't need much convincing. We were both 22, freshly done with our second year of college, and I needed to be somewhere that didn't remind me of anything. Derek wasn't the outdoorsy type, but he wasn't a complainer either. He packed what I told him to pack. Decent boots, 2 layers, a headlamp, enough food for 3 days. We drove up on the Thursday evening and parked at the edge of his family's property, where an old forestry road turned to gravel, and then stopped making sense entirely. The plan was simple. 2 nights, 1 ridge, a fire each evening, and nothing else. The first day was exactly what I needed. Cool air, enough cloud cover to keep the sun soft, a trail that climbed steady without ever being cruel. Derek talked most of the way up. About school, about a girl, about whether he should switch his major. Normal stuff. I mostly listened and watched the tree line. Old habit. We made camp on a flat shelf of rock just below the ridge crest, got a fire going before dark, ate well, slept fine. The second day was when things started turning, not in any obvious way. Nothing jumped out. It was more like a slow change in the quality of the air. The way a room feels different when you realize someone else has been in it. We pushed higher that morning along a narrow game trail that Derek said should loop back around to camp by afternoon. About 2 hours in, we passed a section of trees with the bark on every trunk facing us had been scraped clean, not chewed, not weathered, scraped, long vertical stripes going from about knee height up to well above our heads, too high for a deer, too wide for any claw mark I recognized. Derek photographed it. I just looked at it for a while and didn't say what I was thinking. An hour past that, we found the stones. It was a rough arrangement, maybe 15 feet across, half buried in dead leaves and moss, not random rock scatter, placed, set in a circle with a kind of intention that felt deliberate, even after however many years of weather had settled over them. Inside the circle, the ground was different, darker, compact, bare in a way that didn't match the surrounding forest floor. No leaves inside. No growth, just that pressed down dark earth, like the ground there had been used in a specific way for a long time. Derek said it looked like an old campfire ring. I said sure, maybe. I didn't go inside it. I don't know exactly why. Some part of me just didn't want to. We ate lunch on the trail 10 minutes further up and didn't talk about the stones. By the time we got back to camp that evening, the light was already going orange behind the ridge, and the temperature had dropped faster than I expected. We got the fire up and sat close to it. Neither of us said much. There's a specific kind of quiet that happens between two people when both of them are thinking about the same thing, but neither wants to say it first. We turned in around 10. I woke up somewhere past midnight. The fire had burned down to coals. Derek was asleep. I lay still the way you do when something has pulled you out of sleep, but you're not sure what. Then I heard it below the ridge, a sound I want to describe carefully, because describing it wrong would make it sound like something explainable. It wasn't an animal moving through brush. It wasn't wind. It was a footstep, one heavy footstep, a pause, then another, slow and deliberate, moving along the base of the rock shelf our tent was sitting on. It went from one side to the other, paused at the far end for a long moment, then started back. I reached over and put my hand on Derek's arm. He was already awake. His arm was rigid. We both lay completely still. The step circled beneath us one more time, then went up the slope and faded. Whatever it was, it didn't hurry. That's the part that's hardest to explain. The patience of it. It wasn't startled. It wasn't passing through. It moved like something that had all the time in the world and knew we weren't going anywhere. At some point before dawn, Derek whispered, "Do you smell that?" I did. Something low and damp, like wet soil turned up from deep underneath. It came and went on the air for maybe 20 minutes, then cleared. We left before sunrise, didn't pack cleanly, just got the important things and moved down the trail with our headlamps in the gray pre-dawn. We didn't run, but we didn't stop either. When we hit the gravel road and saw the truck, Derek unlocked it from 20 feet away, and we got in simultaneously without a word. On the drive back through Harlan, we stopped at a gas station for coffee. The woman at the register glanced at our muddy boots and asked if we'd been up on the ridge. I said, "Yeah, up near Copperhead Bluff." She nodded once and said, "Most people don't stay up there past the first night." I asked her why. She just picked up a rag and started wiping down the counter. That was the whole conversation. Derek deleted the photos of the scraped trees that afternoon. He said he didn't want them on his phone. I didn't argue. I understood the feeling, like keeping them meant keeping a connection to something you were better off leaving behind. I still drive through Harlan sometimes when I'm heading back into that part of the state. I never stop, and I never look toward the ridge when I pass it. Not because I think something's watching. I just don't want to find out whether I'm right or wrong about that. I was 17, the winter. Everything at home got unbearable. My parents weren't fighting exactly. It was worse than that. They'd gone completely silent with each other. The kind of silence that fills every room in a house and makes you feel like you're suffocating just sitting at the dinner table. My older sister had already left for college, and I was the only one left to absorb it. So when my Uncle Pete called in, late December, and said he had room at his place for the holidays, I packed a bag the same night. Uncle Pete lived alone in a narrow 2-story house at the edge of Spruce Knob, West Virginia, back in 2007. No neighbors within visible distance. The nearest town was a 20-minute drive down a road that iced over badly in winter and basically became decorative. He worked seasonally for a forestry company and spent the rest of his time doing exactly nothing, which I respected. He was my dad's younger brother, quieter than my dad, harder to read, the kind of man who said 4 words when 2 would do. He picked me up from the bus station in Elkins without much ceremony. Handshake, my bag in the truck bed, country station on low the whole drive. When we pulled up to the house, the mountains were right there, closer than I expected, like they'd leaned in while I wasn't looking. The tree line started maybe 40 feet behind the back porch and went up and up until it disappeared into the gray December sky. Inside, the house was warm and smelled like coffee and firewood. Pete showed me the spare room, pointed out where the extra blankets were, and then stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, like he was deciding something. Finally, he said, "There are trails behind the house. You can walk them during the day. Stay on the ones that go east. Don't follow anything that looks like a path going up toward the rock face. And don't go out after dark. Not even to the porch. I waited for him to explain. He went back to the stove and stirred something. That was it. I didn't ask questions that first evening. I figured it was hunting land, or maybe he had an arrangement with a neighbor, property lines. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation and left it alone. The first 2 days I walked the eastern trails, like he said, through stands of bare winter birch and frozen creek beds, just glad to be somewhere that wasn't my parents' silent house. Pete and I ate together, played cards in the evenings, didn't need to talk much. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. On the third day I went west, not because I wanted to be difficult. I just got turned around on a trail I thought I knew, and ended up facing the slope that climbed toward the rock face Pete had mentioned. The trail there was faint but real, worn down through the leaf cover, curving uphill through the trees. I told myself I'd go just far enough to see what was up there, then come back. About 10 minutes up the slope I found the first one. A small bundle of sticks, maybe 8 inches long, tied together with dark cord and hanging from a low branch by a short length of wire. I stopped and looked at it. It wasn't decoration. The sticks were arranged in a specific pattern. 2 crossed, 2 parallel, and there were small grey feathers knotted into the cord. I didn't touch it. 50 feet further up there was another one. Same construction, same cord, hanging from the same height, as if whoever placed them had been deliberate about the elevation. Between the 2 bundles, the silence on that slope was total. No wind in the branches. No birds. Just that flat, heavy quiet that has a weight to it you feel in your chest more than you hear. I started back down. I was halfway to the eastern trail when I noticed the figure. He was standing at the base of a wide oak, maybe 30 feet to my left, completely still. An older man, I thought at first. Grey clothing, dark boots, no hat despite the cold. But something about the stillness was wrong. Not the stillness of someone who just noticed me and stopped walking. The stillness of something that hadn't been moving to begin with. His head was turned toward me at an angle that was slightly too far, like the neck had 1 extra degree of rotation in it. His hands were at his sides. He wasn't blinking. I said, "Hey, sorry, I think I got turned around." He didn't answer. He didn't move. He just kept looking at me with that too far head angle, and I became aware that I couldn't hear him breathing, even though the air was cold enough that I could see my own breath clearly. His didn't show. I turned and walked. Not ran. Every instinct said don't run. Just walked fast and steady, back to the eastern trail, and then down to the house. Pete was on the back porch when I came out of the tree line. He looked at my face and then looked at the slope behind me. He said, "Which way did you come from?" I told him. He brought me inside without another word, locked the back door, and pulled the curtain across it. We sat at the kitchen table, and he poured coffee for both of us. After a long silence, he said, "He shows up when someone goes up that slope. Been that way as long as I've owned this land. He doesn't follow below the tree line, just stays up there and looks." I asked him what it was. Pete wrapped both hands around his mug. I stopped trying to figure that out a long time ago. That night, I heard footsteps on the slope behind the house, slow, unhurried, moving back and forth along the edge of the tree line, like something pacing out a boundary. Pete sat at the kitchen table the entire night with a mug of coffee that went cold and a posture that said he'd done this before. He didn't sleep. I don't think he expected to. I left 2 days later, hugged him at the bus station, told him to call more often. He said he would. On the ride back, I watched the mountains go flat in the distance through the window and kept thinking about that too far head angle, that absent breath, cloud and cold air. The way it stood at the base of that tree like it had been standing there for years and had no reason to stop. I never went back to Spruce Knob. Uncle Pete passed away 4 winters later. Nothing suspicious, just his heart. I've thought about that sometimes, about what it meant to live up there all those years alone, knowing what was on that slope, what kind of arrangement a man makes with something like that, just to keep living in a place he loves. I still don't have an answer. I'm not sure I want one. Back in 2019, during the early stretch of the COVID lockdown, I was one of the few people still on the roads. Essential worker, they called it. I drove supply routes across the eastern states, medical equipment mostly, the kind of cargo that couldn't wait for the pandemic to settle down. The highways were empty in a way I'd never seen before. No trucks, no commuters, nothing. Just me and the road and the occasional state police cruiser, sitting in a median going nowhere. It felt like driving through a world that had been paused mid-breath. It was a Tuesday night in late November. I was deadheading back from a run near Staunton, taking Route 250 west through the Appalachian stretch outside of Monterey, Virginia. I took it instead of the interstate because construction delays had the highway backed up, and at 11 p.m. with no traffic anywhere, the mountain road made more sense. I'd driven it before in daylight. Long curves, heavy forest on both sides, the mountain dropping away into darkness on the western edge. Decent road. I knew it. What I didn't know was what was on it that night. About 12 miles past the Highland County line, I came around a long left-hand curve, and my headlights swept across something in the road. I lifted off the gas immediately. My first thought was deer, the way it caught the light, the shape of it low on the asphalt. But as I slowed and the headlights held steady on it, that thought left fast. It was a man, crouched in the center of the road, both palms flat on the asphalt, head hanging down, completely still, not collapsed, not hurt, crouched, the way you'd crouch if you were pressing your hands down intentionally, like you were feeling for something underneath the surface. He was shirtless. In November, in the mountains, I could see the ridge of his spine, the bones of his shoulders, the pale gray-white of his skin in my headlights. I stopped the car about 30 feet back. He didn't react. No flinch from the headlights, no look up, nothing. The engine was running, and he was 20 feet from my front bumper, and he just stayed down there with his hands on the road, like I wasn't there at all. During lockdown, the roads were so empty that part of my brain said, "This man needs help." The other part of my brain said something else entirely, and I listened to that part instead. I tapped the horn. One short tap. His head came up slowly. He turned and looked directly at me through the windshield. And I want to be careful about how I say this, because I've gone back and forth on it for a long time. His face was wrong. Not injured. Not sick. Wrong in a way I'm still not able to fully put into words. The eyes were too wide, too far apart, and they caught my headlights the way a deer's eyes catch them. Flat, reflective, like the light was bouncing off a surface rather than going into it. No depth behind them, just that flat caught light look that made my stomach drop before I even understood why. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he stood up. He was tall. Though the kind of height that your body registers as wrong before your brain does. His arms hung at his sides, and when he came to full height, the length of them relative to his torso was off. Too long, hanging wrong, the hands dropping almost to his knees. He just stood there in the center of the road in my headlights, bare-chested in the November cold, completely still, looking at my windshield. The road behind me was empty for miles. Lockdown, empty. No one coming. No one who would see any of this. He took one step toward the car. I put it in reverse and went backward up that mountain road for close to 200 feet before I found a shoulder wide enough to swing around on. I kept my eyes on him the whole time I reversed. He didn't follow, just stood in the shrinking cone of my headlights, arms at his sides, watching me go. When I got turned around and hit the accelerator heading back east, I checked the mirror once. The road was empty. Nothing. No figure. No movement. Just dark asphalt and white lines, and the forest closing in on both sides. I drove to a rest stop outside Staunton and sat with the engine on and the doors locked for 20 minutes before my hands steadied enough to drive properly. The thing about lockdown was nobody was supposed to be out. No hikers, no hunters, no reason for any person to be on that stretch of mountain road at 11 p.m. in November, with no shirt and no car and no light. I passed nothing for 30 miles in either direction. There was no camp, no trailhead, no structure, nothing that explained a man being there. I looked up that stretch of 250 when I got home, found a few old posts on hiking forums, the vague kind you scroll past when you're not looking for anything. One of them, dated years before lockdown, was from a driver who said he'd stopped on that same road for something in the road. He didn't describe it in detail. His last line said, "Whatever it was already looking at my headlights before I came around the curve, like it heard me coming from a mile back." I never filed a report. I didn't know what I would have written down. I still drive the eastern routes, still cross into Virginia on long hauls, but I add 40 minutes to any run that would take me through Highland County after dark. I go around. Dispatch has never asked why. I've never explained it. Some stretches of road you drive once at the wrong hour, and that's it. You just never go back. I don't need an explanation for what was crouched in that road with its palms flat on the asphalt. I don't need to know what it was listening for underneath the surface, or why it stood up the way it did, or how it disappeared in the 10 seconds it took me to get turned around. I just know that the roads were empty. That whole lockdown. Empty everywhere, except there. Story 5. The last shift before I quit. I want to be honest about something before I start. My name is James, and I am not a superstitious person. I grew up in a practical household. My father was an electrician. My mother kept the books for a small contracting company. We didn't do ghost stories. We didn't do superstition. We did schedules and receipts and things that made logical sense. So when I tell you what happened during my night shifts at the Esso station off Route 219 near Marlinton, West Virginia, I need you to understand that I spent a long time trying to find the logical explanation before I accepted that there wasn't one. I took the job in October of 2019. I just moved back from Pittsburgh after a situation and my previous job that I don't need to get into. Marlinton was where my aunt lived. She had a spare room, and the station needed someone for the overnight shift, 10 at night to 6 in the morning, because nobody local wanted it. I found out why pretty quickly. The pay was decent, but the location was genuinely isolated. Mountains on every side, the Greenbrier River a quarter-mile west, and the nearest other building was a shuttered hardware store a half-mile down the road. After midnight on a weeknight, you could go 3 hours without a single car. Just you, the fluorescent hum overhead, the tree line starting right at the edge of the parking lot, and the mountains sitting black and enormous behind everything. The station had a small attached garage bay that hadn't been used in years, and behind the main building there was a narrow gravel strip where the owner kept a rusted propane tank and 2 dead refrigerator units. Past that, maybe 60 feet from the back door, the forest started. Dense Appalachian tree cover, the kind that goes from manageable to completely impenetrable within about 20 feet of the edge. I never went back there at night. From the beginning, something about standing at the back door and looking toward those trees after midnight felt deeply wrong, and I trusted that feeling without needing to justify it. The first 3 weeks were uneventful, quiet, lonely, occasionally boring, but uneventful. I stocked shelves, ran the register for the few truckers who came through, drank bad coffee, and watched the clock. Normal enough. The first thing I noticed was the propane tank. It was a big, old, horizontal tank. White once, now mostly rust and faded paint, sitting on a concrete block frame behind the building. I walked past it every night when I took the trash to the dumpster on the east side of the lot. One night in early November, I noticed something on the side of it, scratch marks, long parallel lines gouged into the rust, going from about knee height up to as high as I could reach. They weren't there the week before. I stood there with my flashlight on them for a long time. They were too wide to be a raccoon, too deep and deliberate for weather damage. I told myself it was probably a bear. Black bears come down from the highlands in fall looking for food. I told myself that, and mostly believed it. 2 nights later, I heard it for the first time. I was behind the register, around 2 a.m. No customers. The parking lot empty under the lights. The tree line dark beyond the lot's edge. It came from the direction of the back of the building. A sound I want to describe carefully. Not an animal moving through brush. Not wind. It was a scraping sound, slow and rhythmic, like something dragging a hand along the side of the building while it walked. It went from the back corner, along the east wall, stopped at the edge of the garage bay, and then went silent. I stood behind that counter, and did not move for 4 full minutes. Then headlights swept the parking lot and a pickup pulled in for gas, and I cannot tell you the relief I felt at the sight of another human being. The driver was a middle-aged man in a hunting jacket. I rang him up, made small talk, stretched it out as long as I could. After he left, I called my manager Tommy on his cell, even though it was 2 a.m. He picked up on the 4th ring, groggy and irritated. I told him what I'd heard. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "Just stay inside. Don't go around the back of the building at night. There's a reason I don't do the overnight anymore." I asked him what that reason was. He said, "Just stay inside, James," and hung up. I should have quit that night. I know that now, but the rent was due, and my options were limited, and I told myself I was probably overreacting. The 2nd week of November, around 1:30 a.m. on a Wednesday, a man came into the station. He came on foot, no car, no bicycle, just walked out of the dark on the road from the north and pushed through the front door. He was wearing work boots and canvas trousers and a flannel shirt that was entirely wrong for the temperature, which was below 30 that night. No jacket, no hat, no gloves. He was tall, raw-boned, with a face that was deeply weathered, the kind of weather that comes from years of outdoor work in hard conditions. He walked to the cooler at the back of the store, stood in front of it for a long moment without opening it, then walked to the counter. He put both hands flat on the counter and looked at me. I said, "What can I get for you?" He didn't answer. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not hostile, not confused, just blank in a way that felt deliberate. But the blankness was something he was maintaining rather than something natural. His hands on the counter were wrong. The knuckles were too large, the fingers too long, and the skin across them was mottled and dark in a way that didn't match his face. I noticed he wasn't blinking. I stood there behind the register and watched him not blink for a period of time that I cannot accurately estimate, but felt like a very long time. Then he turned and walked back to the front door. He pushed it open and stepped outside, and I watched through the window as he walked across the lit parking lot toward the tree line, not toward the road, toward the trees. He reached the edge of the lot where the light stopped and the darkness started, and he walked directly into it without slowing down, without hesitation, without a flashlight or any light at all, and the darkness took him immediately like he'd stepped through a curtain. I stood at that window for a long time. There was no car parked on the road, no bike against the building, no direction he could have come from that made sense given the nearest occupied structure was a mile away in each direction. I checked the security camera footage the next morning before Tommy arrived. The camera above the door had captured him walking in and walking out, but the timestamp on the footage was wrong. It read 3:47 a.m., and I knew for certain he'd come in closer to 1:30. 2 hours off. The camera had never been wrong before. I told Tommy. He watched the footage without expression, rewound it, watched it again. Then he closed the laptop and said, "How many more weeks do you need before you've saved enough to move on?" I said maybe 3. He nodded. "Keep the back door locked. Don't take the trash out after midnight. And if he comes in again, just let him stand there. Don't ask him anything. Don't make eye contact. Just wait." I asked Tommy if he knew who it was. He looked at me for a moment and then looked out the window toward the tree line. He said, "There's a cabin up on that ridge that's been empty for 30 years. Before that, a man lived in it alone for a long time. Hunters used to see him sometimes on the high trails. Then one winter they stopped seeing him." He paused. "The cabin's still up there. I've never gone up to look at it, and I'm not going to." He walked away before I could ask anything else. I finished out the month, kept the back door locked, kept my eyes down when the lot was empty and the tree line felt too close. The man didn't come back inside, but twice more during those final weeks, on nights when the cold had dropped below 20 and the mountains were invisible behind low cloud, I heard that scraping sound along the east wall of the building, slow, deliberate, moving from the back corner to the garage bay and stopping. Each time I stood behind the register and waited until it stopped. Each time it eventually did. I left the job on the last Friday of November, gave Tommy a week's notice, worked it out, handed back the key. On my last shift, I stood in the parking lot at 6 a.m., When my replacement arrived and looked at the tree line in the grey early light, the ridge above the forest was just visible, dark against the sky, and somewhere up there, according to Tommy, was a cabin that had been empty for 30 years. I thought about the man's hands on my counter, the way the darkness had taken him without any resistance at all. I've been back through Marlinton once since then, passing through on a longer drive. I didn't stop. The station was still open, still lit, the same fluorescent glow over the same empty parking lot. I drove past it without slowing and kept my eyes on the road ahead and not on the tree line and not on the ridge above it. Some jobs you leave and never think about again. This isn't one of them. I think about it most on cold nights when the temperature drops fast and the dark comes early. I think about a man walking out of nothing onto a mountain road in 30-degree weather with no jacket and no explanation. I think about what Tommy said about that cabin, and I think about whatever was dragging itself along the outside wall of that building in the dark, patient and slow, stopping at the same spot every time like it was waiting for something on the other side of the wall to finally open the door. I never opened it. I'm glad I never opened it.